Welcome to the Hunt Fish Wisconsin podcast. We are all things outdoors, all things Wisconsin, all the time. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I hope you enjoy the show. How you doing, Brady?
Good. How are you, Nathan?
I'm doing good. Excited to talk some deer hunting.
Heck yeah, man. It's that time of year again.
So, I guess to get started, I'm going to, say that it is end of June. So, summer's here. It's a little bit late. It doesn't really feel like summer yet. But at this point, I got my trail cameras out. They're just soaking. I'm not checking them very often. What are you doing?
Pretty much the same thing as you. I guess I've got my trail cameras out too. I use trail cameras where I can't glass or I can't shine. So I would say I see more deer that I'm wanting to shoot, when I'm shining and I'm glassing. But if I have a particular spot in mind and I know I put that camera there, that if a buck is in that area or whatever I'm after is in that area, it should come by that camera, and I have no way of shining or glassing it. So that's usually how I use cameras, because otherwise I would run way too many cameras. So right now I run 6 cameras.
Okay.
And so I I put those on public and private land. Generally speaking, most of my private land pieces I have shining or glassing access to. And then when I say glassing, I'm talking either from a vehicle or I go and I do a sit, which I don't do that too often, but I'll go out during the summertime, when it's not too hot that I can bear it, and go and sit in the stand and actually see where these deer are coming out, if need be, if I can't see it from a vehicle. So I guess I use the 3 this time of year a lot, and this is the best time of year to do it because they're the most patternable this time of year, and then getting into fall before bow season. So that's usually what I do is use those 3 techniques and figure out where the deer are when they're not being pressured by hunting pressure. So
okay. Now I want to dig a little deeper on that though, because as we talked about before, I am not the biggest deer hunter in the world, so there's a lot of aspects of the things you just said that I need to wrap my head around.
Sure.
So now, like for me, when I'm thinking in my head right now to the spots that I deer hunt, which are all public spots, one private, but mostly all public.
Yep.
It's all hardwoods. There are fields in the area. So for me, in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, it doesn't pay for me to go glass these fields because I don't even know if these deer I'm seeing are going into my woods versus, the woods, say, on the opposite side of the field. So for me, in my mind, it makes more sense to run cameras in the areas, in the woods I am hunting, because at least then I know what's coming through. So I guess my question to you is, when you're out glassing these fields, are you just saying, okay, these are deer I see in the area, so there's a chance they might be coming through my area? Or break that down for me.
So I guess we'll break apart cameras and we'll break apart shining and glassing, because those are basically 2 groups of the same thing.
So let's start with the shining glassing then.
Okay. So shining glassing, depending on what night or what time of night you go out, says a lot about where that deer's bedding during the day. So just because like I shine probably 80% of the time I'm shining and I'm glassing during a work night, like during the week. Like tonight, maybe I'll go out, right as it gets dark. And then I get back at, midnight or 12:30, whatever. And then I'm able to get to sleep and get some sleep, So if it was vice versa, I would be, I would be up until, 4 in the morning or whatever, and I would just go to work then, So I do a lot of my shining, in the twilight hours to midnight. So what that tells you when you shine at that time of night, if you're seeing a deer in an area, he hasn't gone far from where he lives during the day or where he beds, basically. So when I see a deer in a particular area, last night was a great night to go out. I went out and I saw, 5 or 6 really good bucks. And that was coinciding with, the frontal passage last night with the thunderstorms, ending. So I saw a lot of them, and I saw a lot of them, in that period, before midnight. So those deer weren't far from where they were bedding. Most likely. It gets a little bit more challenging in open country because they probably can go a little bit farther. But, so that, I guess does that kind of answer your question on, with shining, how to trace them back to where they're coming from? Because in your situation, you're talking about, a field that's sort of near a woods you can hunt. If you did the same scenario and you went out and you shined that field, or you glassed it or whatever, even cameras, and it was before midnight, at least you know that deer hasn't gone far from that field. And you can say that with most certainty. I mean, they don't run 6 miles to go eat somewhere around here. They might do something like that out west. They might go a mile or two farther than they would go here. But there's less food out there. So here you're dealing with stuff that's pretty close to where they're bedding in that time frame. Now, if you're shining after that, it's kind of up in the air. And if you get trail cam pictures after that, I mean, it's kind of up in the air until, 5, 6 in the morning or whenever the sun's coming up. Then you're probably, again, if you got your trail cams set in the woods, they're probably, again, not very far from where they're bedding if you're getting them as the sun's coming up. So that middle of the night to 2, 3 in the morning can be a little challenging, but that deer is somewhere in the vicinity of, you still know he's somewhere in the vicinity of where he beds. And that goes the same with trail cameras. I mean, if you go put a couple trail cameras on that field, you're going to get the same intel that you would with shining, as far as time frame. So does that kind of answer what you're getting at?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I getting it. Yep. I'm tracking on that. So now, like, for me, my cameras are out. I have 6 cameras out, just like you do. I have my cameras set up on trails. They're not where I'm going to put stands.
Yep.
But they're also not super far away from where I'll put stands. And all I'm doing right now is I'm just trying to see what is in the area. So I'll check the cameras here. They've been out there for a month, the first week of July. I'll go check them. And depending on what they show me, I'll move them based on that.
Sure.
The small chunk of private that I have access to, the camera I have out there, well, there's 2 cameras out there. I'll actually leave those probably for the whole season. Just because of where they are, they're in a good spot where there's a lot of human activity, so the deer aren't so spooked. I mean, you'll be out there cutting wood, and the deer will sit there and watch you.
Sure.
So I feel like those ones I'll probably leave, so that way I can check those a little bit more often. But I also don't hunt that property, but maybe once or twice a year.
Yep.
So because I'm still new to this, my goal with those other 4 cameras are to find some deer that are worth trying to harvest early. I don't want to wait till the rut to fill my deer tag.
Yep.
I want to fill it as soon as possible. And I guess that's what I'm hoping I can accomplish with the cameras. They're going to give me that insight, and okay, there's deer here, they're moving through around this time. This is where you want to be.
Yep. And cameras are really fun. They can be frustrating for me at times, and it wasn't as frustrating when I first started hunting public land. I was in the same boat as you. I want to get them cameras out, and I want to go see what's out there. And in most every spot that I had, which wasn't very many spots. But what started happening was I was new to these spots, so I didn't always know where I was going to get the best pictures, if that makes sense. So I went many years, getting a few pictures here and there of good deer, but not actually thinking on how that actually fits into the big scheme of things on that property. So when I say I get frustrated now, it's because I've been doing this pretty hardcore for 3 or 4 years now with public land, especially, and really trying to put the odds in my favor any way I can. I go put those cameras out in a spot that I got big bucks on camera, whatever I'm after. I got those on camera a couple of years ago on the same tree, on the same trail, and I know it's a good spot. And you put it there, and he doesn't come through there anymore. So something obviously changed, or my technology isn't working. So I get frustrated with cameras that way, but they're essential to run them if you need to, and if you want to. So like I said before, I use them because I hunt so much land. I use them where there's no way in heck I'm going to be able to shine or glass or anything. I have no idea what's on that property if I don't use the camera. So even in your situation, if you can glass or shine it, those cameras do teach you a lot, and they teach you a lot about deer movement, I think. But I grew up using cameras on private land in Minnesota and western Wisconsin. So I already knew how they kind of operated, but it's a whole different ball game on public, because you can't run 60 cameras on public land and put them down at waist level and not lock them down you can do that, but they get stolen. So when I run cameras on public, I put them high in the tree, facing down, and I lock them in. And if there's some sort of a locking passcode on the trail camera, I do that too, and I lock the cover, and so I do everything I can to keep them from getting stolen. But again, that's a lot of effort.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of
all mine are high.
Yep.
I got a nice bruise on my stomach right now from when I put them out. The tree I put my stick on wasn't straight. It had a nice bend in the middle.
Yep.
And I was up there trying to hang it, and the bottom of the stick kicked off the tree, and I came tumbling down.
Oh, geez.
But, it happens.
Yeah, it definitely does happen. If you do it long enough, you're going to fall out. But I've been pretty fortunate.
I'd rather have a bruise. Go ahead. You've been pretty fortunate.
Oh no, I've been pretty fortunate not to fall out really, but I've gotten close, and I've with icy conditions and with muddy conditions, I've definitely had my feet both come out from underneath me and had to hang on.
Yeah.
So it's
I'd rather have a bruised stomach and a camera that's going to be there when I go to check it versus the opposite. So.
Yeah.
So what's next? So you got your cameras out, you've been doing your spotting. What's your next phase?
Well, the next phase is, I carry this out until, about the beginning of September. I go out when I can shining and I check the cameras every couple of weeks, 3-4 weeks. And then once you get into August and early September, before the season, I kind of know where, for the most part, where the good bucks are, where the small bucks are, where the does are. I kind of know where everything is, on the properties that I really have put a lot of time scouting on. So at that point, what I do is, and not everybody does this, but I'm kind of a mapping whiz. I really enjoy going on the computer and mapping properties and getting data on stuff. So I'll take data points on all these deer that I see, and I'll sort of map them. Yeah. So then I'm able to kind of come up with some game plans and wind conditions for nights that I can hunt and try to get on these deer. And obviously, if it's one that I really want to go after, or maybe a deer I have a history with, or maybe there's a bunch of does I want to go after, or what have you, I'll know that based on my mapping, and I'll make a list of the things that I want to do this season if I can do them. And like last year, I was on my fourth or fifth hunt, and I harvested a good buck on public land. And that was a deer, or I guess an area that I had shined and had seen a bunch of really good bucks. So then that point forward, I started hunting does and, waited for gun season, when I could hunt with family and go after some more does as well. So, that's kind of my seasonal progression. Once we get into, middle of September, I'm going when I can hunting. So, by that time, my scouting and my glassing and my trail cameras and everything, I pretty much know what I'm going to know for the year. So I pull my cameras. Obviously, if you're hunting private land, and I do hunt some as well, I'd be more inclined to leave them out. I don't like having them out there when people are out there hunting. So I pull the cameras before the season, and then during the rut and stuff, I'll go out and I'll do some night shining, just because it's really fun to go out and see all those deer moving around. But basically all of my infield and in the car scouting with trail cameras and shining are over at that time. So and then I go straight to hunting. So
Okay. I'm gonna do the same. I'm gonna pull my public land cameras as soon as hunting season gets here. For the same reason, them just being there is enough of a reason for them to disappear. The ones I have in private will stay. Now, when hunting season rolls around and you're getting ready to start hunting, what is your focus? I mean, are you opening day? In your mind, are you like, okay, I'm chasing bucks? Or are you, hey, let me put a few does in the freezer right away, and then I got all the rest of the year to focus on getting a good one? What's your mindset?
That's a really good question. Depending on where I'm hunting, opening day, it has something to do with it. If I'm at home, in Minnesota, and we have access to all the food sources and everything, you see a lot more does, in those situations. So I'm always open to shoot does, and I think it's important, to balance the herd and to get numbers, where they need to be, and then also so you have a better rut. So I'm always open to shooting does. It's just, I really, honestly, on public land, I really don't see that many does where I hunt. And that's because I've done the scouting, and, I hunt a lot of the swamp edges and islands and stuff that's pretty nasty to get to, you might say. So in a lot of those areas there aren't a lot of does out there. I mean, there are areas that hold does, tamarack swamps and stuff, and they do go on islands as well. But, if that's the best swamp on a property, a particular property that you're hunting, a lot of the times, they're nicer bucks or they're bucks, because, those are premium spots for those bucks to bed. Those are if you go out scouting in the springtime, which, I mean, we'll go around the circle and talk about that, but if you do that scouting in the spring, you find a lot of doe beds in the thick. You don't find a whole lot of them out in those small little miniature islands and, those little micro spots like a swamp edge and stuff. You don't find as many there. You find them off of the swamp edge and like up in the young aspen or up in the, younger stuff that's thick, maybe prickly ash or something. You find a lot of doe groups bedding in those areas because they're bigger areas, they're thicker, and they're does bed more together, so they're able to sense danger coming into those areas, regardless of how they bed. They can bed in the middle of a wide open field, does can, and they feel a lot more safe because there's more eyes, there's more ears, because they're all bedding together. Where bucks are looking more for that key micro spot, where they themselves, because they primarily bed alone, there's bachelor groups this time of year, and they might not be bedding far from each other, but they're kind of loners, bucks are. So, especially when they get older. So they're looking for those micro spots, where they can really optimize their senses. So back to that question, I'm open to shooting, whatever. If I'm after does, or I'm always after does. So if they do present themselves, that's great. But most of the time they don't where I go. So
that's what I was just going to ask. That was going to be my next question. Is if you go to your spot where there's a big buck in the area, and that doe comes through, are you letting her pass, or are you going to harvest? Because for me, if I'm there, I'm going to let her walk. Because she's not what I'm looking for while I'm there that day.
Yeah, and that gets a little tricky too because, well, there's two elements that are involved here. It's that time of night. If it's does move when bucks do as well. So if a doe comes through and you think this is the night, man, that buck is going to come through here. It's a little tough to want to shoot them if and you feel really confident that buck's going to come through there. And I have done that before. But just keep them. I just like to say, don't forget about the does. If you shoot your buck, and I used to be this way. I'd shoot my buck like last year. I'd shoot him after 4 days. I'm done, and then I wouldn't go after the does. And then we have herd issues then. So don't forget about them. But I do see where you're coming from, and I have done that. It's tough. If you're after a particular deer and that's not the one you're after, regardless of what it is, it can be tough. And if you're way back in there too, you're going in there for that buck. I mean, if you're a mile into a swamp, you're in there for him. You're in there for one deer. Or maybe you are in there for a doe, whatever you're in there for. If that game doesn't present itself, and another one comes by, that's pretty tough. But just keep your mind open to it because, there's only so many opportunities in the season to tag your does, and we need to do that. So
I'm going to give you a scenario. This is what happened to me last year. And then you give me your thoughts on this scenario. So last year I went to a brand new spot, never been to it, didn't scout it. I went in there not knowing anything. I went in there in September because this is not DNR land, but it's still public. So you can leave a stand on this property.
Okay.
You can put them up a week before season. They got to be out a week after season. So I went in there. I think season was already open or was just about to open. Put a stand up. And then I didn't touch it again until November.
Okay.
I went in there the first week of November, and I moved my stand. I would climb the tree, took my... No, I'm wrong. I'm sorry, I'm wrong. I went in there in October and moved the stand. I didn't hunt it, I just moved it.
Okay.
So I didn't actually get a chance to hunt it, though, until the first week of November. My plan was I'm going in there, and I'll probably shoot some does. I didn't expect to see any bucks in there. I figured it'd be a good doe spot. So I go out in the morning before it's light out, and there are does everywhere. And I'm tripping over them walking in. That's how many does are in this place. So I'm pretty confident. I get my stand. 3 does are standing there watching me climb the tree. Sun comes up. There's not a deer in sight. No does, no nothing. 8:30, a buck comes through. I shoot the buck. Fill my tag. I'm out of there. The next week, the second week in November, I'm like, well, I'll go get a doe out of there now. I go back in there. I see 3 more bucks and hear a 4th one raking, but I never got eyes on them. And again, not a single doe. So now in my mind, this spot will not get touched until the first or second week in November, and it is only a buck spot. I could go in the early season and maybe get a doe, but now I'm afraid if I do that, it might ruin it for the rut.
Yeah, and what you're probably seeing there is just like where I live here. You go out shining and glassing, you see does everywhere. The bucks don't live in the block of woods where my house is. And I say don't live, and I mean like summer in the fall patterns. They're not coming out of there. That is, for whatever reason, it's not their kind of habitat. So, actually, I think a spot like what you're talking about, I think you could go in the early season and shoot some does, and you most likely probably wouldn't have an effect on the rut, because those bucks, remember earlier I said don't forget the does, that goes for rut movement too. So when I'm out shining and stuff, and I take note of where those does are, and I, like where my house is here, I know they're behind the house here. So at a certain time of year, they're going to move in here. The bucks are. This is going to be their home for a couple weeks. And I think that's exactly what you saw there.
I think so too. Those deer don't live there year round, but they know there's a lot of does there, and they're coming in looking for them. That first and second week in November.
Yeah, and that so back to what you were saying, I don't have the aerial. I don't know the situation there. I don't know how the lay of the land is. But you probably could get away with it. And and spots like that too, I mean, they need management just like anywhere else. I mean, and what you would in turn do, although you might instill a little bit of pressure on that property, if you didn't really hunt it that hard, I mean, if you only hunted it a few times and killed a few does, you're actually going to create, and this goes for anywhere that you hunt, you're going to create a more intense rut. So I'm going to take 2 examples here. Where I live here, the deer numbers are crazy high. And I'm in the central part of the state. And I've hunted in Minnesota a lot, where I'm from, and I've hunted in western Wisconsin a lot. And I can tell you that those areas have a lot more intense of a rut because there's a lot less does. So if you are able to get in there and kill some does, that's a good thing. It's going to help your buck to doe ratio, and everything feeds off of that too. Your the mortality of your fawns, how large they are and when they're born, plays a lot into their adult life as well. And then your bucks as well are going to probably have bigger horns as well. I mean, if you're after that. So it all plays into each other. So yeah, spot like that, definitely a good rut spot. I mean, that's just like by my house here. It's the same type of situation. So
perfect. Now, you mentioned the islands around swamps, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit here, because that's actually where I just put a bunch of cameras, is the trails that are leading to these islands on these swamps. Because, like you said, I think there's probably some nice deer in there that are not being pressured. So, for me, what I did is I just pull up Google and just start scouring the map, looking for these marshes and looking for these, these islands on them.
Yep.
How are you scouting for them?
So I'm going to just go off the camera story first. And I know some guys do that, and it's not that you're wrong or right. What I do is I keep them away from those areas because, and solely because, if I'm hunting an island, which this is very similar to where I shot my good buck last year, he came off an island and he came like 100 yards across the marsh, and then he staged up right on the mainland, like right on the edge, the very last tree. That's where I killed him before dark. So that to a deer, and you hear people talking about staging areas, that right there to me is the deer staging area. So I don't, and not that you're doing it wrong, not that anybody that does that's doing it wrong. Everybody has their own techniques, but I like to keep them away from where I'm going to hang that stand, which for me is going to be on the edge of that marsh.
Yeah, and these are.
Okay,
yeah,
are.
These cameras, like I said, are on trails going in, but they're not on edges.
Okay. Yeah, and if
so
you're
when I get the pictures of these deer, which I expect I'm going to get, the timeline on them is going to probably be like 9 to 11 at night is what I'm figuring.
Yep.
That's how far off those islands they are.
Okay. So yeah, depending on how far you are from bedding, says a lot about where that time will be. And in the summer, you even on public land, I generally say that they're going to move after dark, just because I see it when I'm hunting. Even private land.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they are dawn and dusk animals. As much as people think they run around all night and they run around, they don't run around all day, that's for sure, but people might think they run around all night. And after 11, 12 o'clock, I see a lot of bedded deer. So they are dusk and dawn animals, I think, primarily. So, that's a lot of the time when they get up out of their beds and they start moving to where they're going to go feed. So yeah, that can tell you where they're going to be coming through, or what time and where they're going to be bedding, But I'd like to just touch on the camera thing a little bit. And I touched on it already, but I like to put them in almost every one of my cameras. I put them on a food source, on a really well used trail, like on a corner of a field or a point of a field or whatever. And it might not, when you're hunting, if you hunted where that trail camera was, you might not see him come out there. But at some point in the 3-week period, those big heavy trails, there's a pretty good chance that one of those good bucks is going to, for whatever reason, walk down that trail. So I've seen it, and I used to put them on like islands and stuff like that, and my percentages went down because if he's not bedding there, or whatever I'm after isn't bedding there, they're never going to come by there. So like you said, you're kind of off the edge and you're kind of like getting up into those bigger trails already. That's a pretty good spot. So from there all the way out to the fields, if you can put them on a big trail, I don't want to say coming right out of the swamp, but where all the trails meet, where they all meet up and they go to that food source. People call those staging areas, but they're big trails that go out to feed. And that doesn't necessarily just have to go out to a field either. Or in ag country it will, but like up north, maybe they're going to an aspen thicket or whatever, a fresh clear cut or something. They don't always have to be going towards a field. So that's where I find the best odds of getting a picture of a big one. So now you had another question, I think, about the islands too.
No.
Okay.
No, I didn't. See, what I'm going to do with these islands is I'm actually, depending on what the cameras tell me, I think I'm going to hold off on them until gun opener.
Okay.
is because where I can set up on the far edge away from those islands, you're probably 100 to 125 yards from the islands.
Yep.
And there's a lot of good visibility. So I think the best shot there, again, depending on what the cameras tell me, is going to be for gun.
Okay. So you're going to set up on the edge or away from the edge?
I'm going to set up. It's hard when you can't see but what it is there's 4 islands and they're completely surrounded by swamp, marsh.
Yep.
So on the edge of that, like when you get about 100 yards away from the closest island, it's hardwoods.
Okay.
So I'm going to set up in those hardwoods, and that way I can overlook all 4 islands. So anything coming in or out, I'll have eyes on.
Yeah, and you say gun season. If you're setting up on a trail that comes out of those islands and it hits the mainland, that's a spot just like where I killed my buck last year. That's a really high percentage area if he's close enough to that mainland on that island. Because if there's like 4 to 6 islands out there and he's on the farthest island, he might go to that third island first, and if there's an oak tree on that island, he might just sit there until it gets dark. So it all depends on the spot. If they're just bypassing
and what
that
we're going to do is we're going to see what the cameras tell me. And I think what I'm going to do is early season, I'm going to go sit out there on the edge of that marsh and just do an observation sit. Not expecting to see anything move through me, but just to get out there and see with my eyes where they're going, what direction they're heading. That will give me a game plan for down the road.
If you can do that observation stand right where that trail comes in, you might have a killing stand.
Well, that's the thing, is because there's so many trails. That's what the cameras are doing. They're going to tell me which trails they're using when.
Yep. Yeah, and I've done that too.
Trail.
You'll see them come onto the mainland down from you too, and you won't be able to kill them. But that'll tell you something that they're in there. I mean, you'll be able to see them. So.
Yep. So that's the plan for that property. I've never hunted this property before. So it's public, but I have high hopes. I got some pretty good feelings about it.
Yeah, just you can hunt that kind of a spot with a variety of winds. The particular spot I killed mine last year, I had it totally blowing out of the marsh back up into the woods behind me. But you could hunt that on a bunch of different winds because when they bed out there on those islands, especially if there's 4 of them, they could bed out there on any wind really. So if you run into a spot like you're talking, they're going to probably bed there. They're going to bed on one of those 4 islands like the majority of the time. Now, if there's just one island and there's only one good point with a certain wind or something, they might use some other areas too. But that kind of a spot you're describing could hold those deer on about any wind. So obviously you don't want the wind blowing right down the trail where he's going to come from, but that's a pretty high percentage spot there. So
very cool. So let me see here. We're in season. We're determining where we're going, and I guess my next thing to cover would be: are you running pretty much run and gun? Are you setting up, like taking the stand up and down every day? Are you leaving stands?
Because I haven't hunted a lot of private land the last about 6-7 years, if it's public land, I never leave my stand. I run a lone wolf
Okay.
stand,
Mm-hmm.
so I just that equipment is too expensive to leave out there. And
I just bought one. I'm very familiar.
yep, they are really nice.
I've always bought cheap stands, little $40 throwaways, because the public land I hunt, you can leave stands. I don't hunt DNR land that I got to take it down every day. And I always bought $40 throwaways. That way, if it turned up stolen, it was never a big deal.
Sure.
I've never had one stolen.
Yeah, and
But
I walked.
did. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I said I did buy a lone wolf this season. I bought the stand and the climbing sticks. I figured that way it'll open up a lot more options for running and gunning type setups. Just showing up, trying a new area. Oh, look at this trail here or this sign. Let me set up right here.
Yeah, it's I've got buddies of mine that I was fortunate. My dad always used lone wolves, but he was like the old like 90s lone wolves, which were like that's when they first came out. So I always thought when I was a kid, like, why are these so special? Like, these are, you can barely stand on the thing. It's so little, but lone wolf has come a long way from when they first came out. And I've used other stands now, and I know buddies that have used other stands, and not that there's not other good ones out there, but it's a super stand. It's a super good. It's quiet and it's light. All that other stuff is like hollow tubing, and you barely bump it and it just clanks. And I mean, you cannot get away with any of that kind of stuff the way I hunt. I mean, you cannot make metallic noises when you're hunting these swamp bucks or whatever. Right? If you're getting close to a mature whitetail, I mean, a doe or buck or any of that, it doesn't matter. I mean, they don't. That's a human noise, 100% to them. A little shuffling in the leaves with your boots, that you'll get away with that way more than you will metal. So,
yeah. And there's no question. Like those old River's Edge, they're so heavy. All those are heavy. They're all heavy. Those, what are they called? Big dog stands, whatever they're called. Heavy. They're very heavy stands. Then you add a pack on top of it. Yeah, you're humping a lot of weight.
Absolutely. Yeah, I haven't hunted a lot with any of those other stands. I know people hunt with muddy and stuff, and I'm sure they're good. I've never changed. I guess I've used a saddle a little bit, and I like it for the fact that you don't have much to bring back there in the woods and bring out at the end of the night. But I used it for a few years, and I went back to lone wolf because I think it puts you in the front of the tree, and you don't have to worry about hanging there, dangling there, making noise with a different kind of a stand. And I don't know. I don't like to try a bunch of new things if what I have works. So I would highly recommend, lone wolf, or I know there's some other ones out there now that are, I think they were designed by Andre DeQuisto too.
Yeah, the XPOs.
Yeah, XPO.
Yeah, I talked to them at one of the sports shows this winter. And yes, Lone Wolf is the one that does all their cast work.
Yep.
So anything that's Lone Wolf actually can be used on the XPOs and vice versa.
Yep. So yeah, those are for sure very nice stands too, from what I've heard other people say. So
yeah, I don't own one. I've never used one, but I've definitely taken a look at them, and they're very close to Lone Wolf and a little bit cheaper.
Yep.
So let's get into a little bit about, your style of hunting. We're talking about public land.
All right. What do you want to know?
Give me the rundown. I mean, I want to hear, what you're looking for, what you're looking for, and then how you're executing.
As far as what I'm looking for, if we take the deer out of the situation, if we just take the animal out of the situation altogether, and we just look at what I hunt, 99% of what I hunt has some sort of water influence, whether it be a stream corridor, marsh, swamp of some variety or another. You know, I do get into the driftless area a little bit and do hunting down there. But boy, if there was ever a better habitat for a big whitetail deer, you know, in Wisconsin, nothing's better than swamp and wet and nasty. That's what I go in. So that's kind of my style, revolves around finding those kind of spots. And you know, and then I go in there and I figure out where they are, where they're hanging out, like in the springtime. And you know, there's properties now this summer. I don't know every property. You know, I haven't walked everything. I mean, there's so much land in Wisconsin that's open for hunting, and so much private land that you might get access to as well. You're not going to put your feet on every piece of land. That's why I shine so much, because I'll go next to those properties and I'll glass those and shine those. And there's been a lot of situations where I said that property's crap. I'm not going to go there. That's dumb. And you go and you shine a 140 class deer. I mean, so I guess depending on where I start, depending on with a certain property, depending on where I come from, where I start, depends on where I go from there. So there's properties that I've never shined or you know, at the time when I go out there and I get my boots on the ground, I've never shined it. I've never walked it, nothing, but it looks like a good swamp. I go walk it. I get the boots on the ground. And then I find sign that makes me want to shine it or want to put a camera out or whatever. But again, like I said, there's properties too that I haven't had time to walk it. I've never been in there ever. And I go and shine a big one or maybe a bunch of deer or whatever. So sometimes it goes that way as well. Once I shine them, I go, oh, I want to get my boots on the ground there, you know. So, and a lot of times in that situation, the boots on the ground comes when I actually have a stand on my back, if I've shined one there. So the first time going in there might be the night that I hunt. And I stare at aerials for hours if I haven't walked in there. And it bugs me because I want to know where those beds are. But like where I shot my buck last year, never walked in there ever before. So a spot like that, you got to just go with your instinct. Go where you think he's going to come out. So that's kind of my year, I guess, what I do, how I go after them. So.
Okay. Let's do the rundown. Why don't you tell me last year's success? I want to hear the story.
Okay. Well.
So, like, from beginning, like, what made you decide to hunt that spot? What made you choose the spot you hunted? That was, like, the whole breakdown. So,
I had looked at this property for many, many years, and it's, like, 45 minutes from my house. So it's a ways away. It's not, and granted, it's pretty close to where I work now, but it's not, as far as on the weekends and stuff, I'm not going to hunt this property that much. So for a long time, I saw that it had like the perfect marsh. Like when you look at an aerial and you can see those well-defined islands and points, and it just looks, it doesn't look like a lake out there, but it looks really flat, and you know, you can tell when you see a good marsh. That's like perfect for what I want to go after as far as terrain. So when I had some time last year in July on a weekend night, I made the drive down there and I shined it, and I saw like 4 or 5 really big deer. You know, you got to keep in mind, these public pieces, you'll see like one good buck here and there. They're usually, you don't see a whole boatload of them together. So I was like, man, I hit the jackpot, you know, this is crazy. And I mean, some of them were really, really big. So obviously I'm going to go in there and get what I can get, you know, I'm going to shoot what I can shoot. But, so that was kind of, an after work kind of a spot, I thought, because I'd be right there. So after after work, I swung in there, and I knew it was going to be a long walk back to where I wanted to go. So I wanted to just get all the way back to the islands to try to shoot something. And you have to kind of go like over some terrain, over like a bluff or a mound, to get back to that swamp. So it tests you, that's for sure. So I got back there, and I got back to that marsh edge, and there's rubs everywhere. There's huge trails coming out of there, and I look out to the marsh, and I'm like, oh my God, that's like the most perfect thing I've ever seen, It just looks like a spot where a bruiser's going to come walking out of, and when you're hunting with the stand on your back like that, it can be tricky when that sign is just all over the place. Like, where do I sit, and still be able to shoot, because it's thick along a swamp edge,
Yep.
So I started walking down, and I saw a big trail coming in, and I was gonna set up on that trail, and there was no good tree there, and I thought he was gonna see me and smell me and the whole works. So I thought, well, I'm just gonna keep going down and see if I can find another tree. Well, I looked on my aerial, and right where I ended up, there was a big trail that came in there as well, and you couldn't really see it on the ground. I wasn't like, oh yeah, there's the trail, I just knew right there was where I was on the GPS. There was a big trail, and they were going to do something there, and I was going to see them at least, and they'd be close. So I set up in a cluster of 3 or 4 maple tree right there. And this spot, it's a marsh off to my east. So I had it with an east wind. So I had it with the wind coming right out of the marsh. So there's no chance of anything smelling me on that trail. Well, I gave it like an hour or something, and all of a sudden I hear sloshing in the marsh down from me, though, down towards where I saw that first big trail. And all of a sudden, here comes Buck walking on the land. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I can't shoot down there. It's so thick, And this is my dream. This is my dream, to shoot a deer coming out of his bed, out of his island bed. I mean, I was just distraught, because I knew, and in my, he had smelled kind of where I was walking in. So I was just all up in arms. I'm like, he ain't gonna come this way. There's no way. And, he's sitting there for probably 15 minutes smelling where I walked in, and then he takes off. I'm like, oh man. Well, at least I saw him, And then I gave it like 15 or 20 minutes, and I'm like, I'm just like so distraught that just happened. And he didn't come by me, and all of a sudden I hear some more sloshing, and this time it's, right in front of me, So I'm like, oh boy, here we go. I mean, that buck came from out there. I mean, is there another buck coming or what, And all of a sudden I just see this towering rack coming right toward me, like, oh. So I already was already losing my cool, and, but the thing that, I've shot a few pretty nice bucks, and the thing that you have to remember when they're coming in like that is you gotta just focus on what you're about to do. You can't look at those horns, and you can't move too fast and do all that kind of stuff. You gotta just keep your cool. So he came in kind of sideways to me. He crossed it must be a little drainage ditch or something, and he totally went 180 degrees the other way, and he came right on what I thought was the invisible trail that I could see on the aerial, but I wasn't sure. And he walked right in, and in that situation, I made the right call by waiting to pull my bow back for a minute. And when he started turning, then I drew my bow, as he was behind some brush, and then I whacked him at 10 yards. So
Nice.
that's the extent of, I guess, what led up to killing him. So.
Very cool. Yeah, that's a good story right there. Any new properties this year, or are you pretty much going to stick with what you've had?
New properties, I guess. Every year changes a little bit. It all depends. Sometimes I'll feel like I'm not seeing that many deer. Like June can be actually really tough, and I didn't touch on this at all. June can be really tough, and people think these deer move all summer. They're hitting the food hard. June, I'd love to see a study on it, but I don't think that they hit the food as hard as people think they do. I don't know what's in the woods at that time of year, but there must be other forbs and stuff that they're eating on, because it gets tough in June to see many good bucks or to see many deer in general sometimes. And this time of year, I a lot of times will go and I'll try shining other properties that I've never walked on, never shined, never nothing. So it does change every year a little bit, because sometimes I'll pick up a deer shining those properties. And I'm like, why didn't I ever go over there, So no, not any real big, changes in properties, but there's a few. I wanted to get more land by my house to hunt. So I started going after a little bit less swampy stuff, but stuff that's a little bit more farm country, kind of prairie type stuff.
Okay.
Stuff that's really wide open and is a lot different hunting than I've done before. So that was the biggest change this last year. I started doe hunting some of that stuff in December, and I was seeing like hundreds of deer a night. So I was like, ooh, it's probably a pretty good spot. So that'll be the biggest change this year, is just a little bit change in terrain. I'm going to hunt a little bit more open country bucks, you might say. So.
Nice. Yeah. I got that one new property I'm going to try. Other than that, everything else will be the same. I'm going to avoid some areas that I hunted last year. You were talking about the driftwood area earlier, and that's kind of the terrain I have. Lots of bluffs, lots of cliffs, lots of steep up and down. And, there's a couple times last year where I'll get in a couple miles, and the only thing in my mind is I don't want to shoot anything back here because I got to drag it out.
Yeah, you got to get it over the mountain, right?
So I'm probably going to cut some of that stuff out. There's rumors that they're trying to change the law where you can start quartering your deer and packing them out. I hope to God they do, because that will open up so much more opportunity.
I think you can already. You just have to have.
You
can,
have to have the height, but you have to bring the spine with you. It's 5 pieces. They don't make it easy. If they would make it like out west where you can just take the meat and be done with it, it'd be a lot easier to get into some of these real remote spots.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little different out here.
There's rumors. There's rumors they're trying to change it. I hope it does change. And that brings up another thing you brought up earlier, was the amount of public land in Wisconsin. People who are from here who've never gone anywhere else, they don't realize how lucky we really are with the amount of public land we have here.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You're spot on. I'm from central Minnesota, and I can only think of a couple like 40-acre chunks where I'm from. There is a lot more public land here. This is like, I call this the big playground in the state. There's stuff to do everywhere. There's public land in farm country. There's public land in the Northwoods. There's public land everywhere. The only place there isn't a whole lot is in Buffalo County.
There's so much public land around even the major cities. It's just crazy how much there is. I hear people complain about seeing so many hunters, and I scratch my head because like last year gun season, I didn't see another hunter.
Yeah.
I had everywhere I went to myself, and it was all public. It wasn't private. bow hunting, I never saw another hunter.
You know,
This is the first year in 5 years that I actually saw another turkey hunter. And I was blown away at the fact I saw another hunter. So that just doesn't happen. I mean,
no,
so,
and you know, I run into hunters where I go. I run into them in the same area as you'd run into them, right where you walk in, and then people get really discouraged. But actually, when I get back in those swamps, and don't think that I'm just walking a mile back in someplace either. I mean, sometimes those swamps are right by the parking area, they're right by the road, or they're in plain sight, and nobody would ever walk in there ever. I mean,
yep.
so you know, people get all discouraged, and I was there too. I know how it is. People get all discouraged when they see people parking someplace where they're wanting to hunt. And if you have the correct terrain, if you have the swamps and you got the really steep bluffs and the terrain, and you know, and even if you don't have that, there's areas people do not go in because it doesn't look like deer habitat. Even with a few cars there or a lot of cars, you know, there can still be good hunting there. So yeah, I know I hear that exact same thing all the time. All I'll say is go to other states. I mean, maybe we don't include like Iowa and other places that, you know, it's hard to get a tag, and you know, there's limited public land, but you might not see anybody just because of the draw of the tag. But you know, Minnesota's where I'm from. I mean, that's a pretty typical. You know, there is no public land. I mean, there's none. So. You know, I'd say just be fortunate that there's this much here. I mean, it's crazy.
Trying to think here. What else should we touch on that I'm not thinking of?
Oh, I don't know. I guess you know, one thing
let's
I didn't.
talk.
One thing.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna talk about shooting your bow a little bit too. I definitely do that too, and I go elk hunting too. So, you know, that's an important part. I mean, you got to go out there and you got to have muscle memory, and you got to be ready to kill that deer too. And you got to be physically fit too. If you're not as fit as you want to be, and you want to do this style of hunting, or any style of hunting,
you're gonna make some people mad. You know how it works. You go out the day before season, you shoot 6 arrows, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
just like you shoot your gun the weekend before opener, and you're ready to hunt. What are you talking about? You gotta practice.
Yep, that's definitely a mentality. It's not my mentality. Yeah. But yeah, so I just wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, we were talking about this the other day about, you're absolutely right. We talked about that the other day about how this time of year we're shooting a lot and getting her honed in. Not only that, but it's fun. I mean, if you don't think shooting your bow is fun, then there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, I love shooting bow. It's when I was a kid, that's all I did. I mean, I didn't do any of this. I would help Dad with the food plots and stuff at home, but I wouldn't. There was nothing else to do. I mean, we hunted one property and that was it. So and then I went out and shot my bow 2 hours a night. So, you know, and I try to, you know, from like middle of July onward, I try to get, you know, at least a half hour in every night. If 20 minutes, I mean, just something that you're shooting some arrows, and getting that muscle memory and figuring it out, because the last thing that I want to do is try to remember how to shoot my bow when they're at 10 yards, you know. So.
Yeah, and I think a big thing with that too is, when that moment of truth comes and that big old buck comes in, you want it to be instinct. You don't want to have to sit there and try to think about what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. You want it to come natural, and you want it to, and that comes with everything. I mean, I brought up shining cameras, you know, putting tree stands. I mean, all that stuff comes way more natural when you do it all the time, or you do it enough, you know, repetition. So, and even going out and looking for beds and looking for areas you're going to hunt. I mean, it all comes with repetition, I believe.
Let's talk scent control for a minute. Now, what is your personal take on scent control products that are available for purchase, whether that be soap, shampoo, carbon suits, the whole 9 yards?
So I used to be, I won't say that I was ever extremely into it. Like I was never, we always got dressed like in the house. And I mean, unless I was like at work or something, then I would dress in the field or something. But, I've never been that big of a stickler about it. And I feel like I've been pretty successful by even being lax with it. I mean, it's not, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I mean, I don't want to shower with like swab or, I don't want to do that because that kind of stuff, they smell that. I mean, and, so I try not to do that. But again, if you're hunting the correct spot with the right wind, you shouldn't get winded. Like you could do anything on this earth to keep a deer from, smelling your feet, like or smelling your boots as you walk in. And I'm telling you 100%, they're going to smell where you walk in. So and not to say that you should not use those products or you should not use a scent suit or a scent tote or whatever. I still do. I use scent lock. I like the clothing itself more than like the product. I really like the clothes. They don't always breathe necessarily the best, but when it gets colder, I think that they stay pretty warm. And granted, it's kind of expensive, but I do wear scent lock, not all the time, and I'm not like washing it all the time, and sometimes it sits out in my living room for, 2 weeks, or whatever downstairs. So it's not like I'm like that big of a stickler on scent, but I hunt the wind. I think you have to hunt the wind. But that stuff can help. I do agree. If you have a deer downwind of you, some of that stuff, if it truly is, you're showered up and you, and that clothing is like activated and stuff, I have seen it sort of work. They're always going to catch human scent regardless of what you do, but it maybe mutes it a little bit. So whether or not that makes you kill the deer or not, is, up to discretion, but, it's not what I attribute to my success. I am a location guy. I want to put myself where I need to exactly be to kill the deer. So I think scent products are great. If you are into that, that's great. But I don't get into it that much.
I do the shower. I shower before I go out, and I wear use the scent-free soap and shampoo.
Yep.
And the scent-free deodorant. I do wash my clothes scent-free. I don't use scent lock or any of the other stuff like that or the blockers. And my hunting clothes are sitting in the closet here right next to me. Because like you, I agree. I think the wind's the most important part. But I think any little thing you can do is not going to hurt.
No,
so,
if you spray that stuff on yourself and you're really diligent about it, I mean, you're not going to make yourself stink any worse. I mean, they don't put that stuff on the market to make you stink.
Well, let's touch off that then. What do you think of things like the products like Nose Jammer? That's the whole purpose of it, is to make you stink.
Yeah, I've never got into that kind of stuff, and I know people really close to me have, but I've never got into it. That's the simple things. I've never gone out to a store and said, oh, I need that. I guess I've grown up seeing the dynamic side of, putting food plots in on private land or like going out and doing logging, and like I see the habitat side of things, and I see like what a deer is looking for where they're living, and I think it comes down more to location and wind and where you place yourself than anything. I don't know. I just attribute my success to different things than maybe other people do. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you use that, my girlfriend uses that. If you use that, that's great. I haven't. So
I bought a can and I sprayed it on my boots and I was like, it smells like goddamn vanilla. I was like, what the hell?
To be honest with you, I've never even smelled what that is. I don't even know. I can't even picture the scent.
It smells like vanilla, man. It smells like vanilla, and I couldn't believe it. But supposedly the theory is that it's supposed to cover your scent. Does it work or not? I don't know. I've heard people swear by it. I'm not using it like you. Before I go hunt, I pull up my little hunt stand app, and I do the little wind check, and it shows me which way the wind's blowing for where I want to go. I pick the site location that looks like the wind's the best for, and that's where I'm going that day.
Absolutely, that's a good strategy.
You know, I mean, for me, I don't get a deer hunt very much because I'd rather be spending my time duck hunting, and so what I normally do is I only deer hunt the afternoons, except for during the rut.
Yep. That actually. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so I let the wind to tell me what I'm hunting for that day. If the wind's only gonna work at this spot here, where most likely there's not gonna be no bucks, but I might get a doe, I'm doe hunting that day then.
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what I touched on earlier. I mean, you got to just be open to whatever presents itself. And I like to kill deer. I don't know. I like killing deer. So, whatever you want to kill is. I mean, you gotta take for it. And you're okay with killing it. I'm all for that. I'm not a. It better be a 140 or 150 or I'm upset with somebody else for not shooting something I would. You know what I mean? So. It's
Yes, I know exactly what you mean because Facebook is a hunter's worst enemy.
It is,
especially these Facebook groups. Maybe your own personal page not so much, but you go in these groups and someone will post a picture with them with a doe, and then you get all the people complaining they're shooting does. Then you'll see another post where someone shot like a little 6-pointer, and then everyone's hounding him because he didn't let it grow.
I can't sit here and act like I'm innocent to that either. When I was younger, I was a little bit more that way. But I understand more now about why. And mainly I learned that because I started hunting public land. I totally get it. And I totally get the people that can only go out a few times a year. And even like you said, I mean, you prefer duck hunting over deer hunting, or maybe you prefer muskie fishing that time of year, or maybe you prefer something else. I totally understand it now, and I don't think that way at all anymore. I think, people need to go out and they need to hunt and they need to do what makes them happy. Hunt the way you want to hunt and shoot what makes you happy and shoot the bow that makes you happy. Use the clothing that makes you. I mean, I really don't get hung up on any of that kind of stuff,
Yeah. My personal philosophy with the deer hunting is the first deer that comes in that's legal is going to die. Within reason. Like, I have no problem shooting a little fork if it's the first deer of the year that came in. It's a little nub buck, I think I'm going to let him go. I don't think I could do it.
Yeah.
But that's the same thing with me is I found out last year that I don't have an interest in shooting does after November 15th. Once I know that they're pregnant, for me, it's like, you know what? I don't want to shoot her. So, but when someone else does and they post it, you know what? It's a congratulations, great job. Go ahead, shoot them all you want. I don't care. Me personally, I can't do it anymore.
Absolutely. And traditionally my favorite time of year to hunt those, and a lot of people would disagree with me on this, but I really like hunting in late season. Like I almost like that more than buck hunting, like earlier in the year. because you just see so much good movement. I mean, and when I'm talking winter, I'm talking like hopefully it's 20 below and there's 2 feet of snow. That'd be ideal. So I love that.
You have fun.
Yeah, that's fun for me. But I know a lot of people aren't in the woods at that time of year. But if you really like to see and kill deer, that's a great time of year to do it. So
yeah, if the weather's like that, I better be in the duck blind.
Absolutely.
That's funny. So I've kept you now we're well over an hour. Can you think of anything else that we should probably touch on that's important?
No, I think that's pretty good. I hope it helps others, especially those that are getting into it and those that are getting into public land running. Hopefully that helps a little bit, because I wish I would have had more of that when I started going on public land. So
yeah, you brought up some good points about the public land stuff, about, think outside the box. You don't have to just be the guy that trugs in the furthest. A lot of times hunting close to the road could definitely pay off.
yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely.
So, I mean,
it's not. Don't do what I did when I started and just say I got to get way back in there. I mean, that is not, just saying that does not get you anything. You got to know that a mile back in there's something that's dynamite, or maybe the dynamite spot is right by the road, so you got to kind of know exactly what you're looking for terrain and what you're looking for. Like I said earlier, I'm looking for swamp edge, and I'm looking for lone trees out there in the swamp and islands and points, and so I'm looking for that kind of stuff. But maybe you're looking for something else. It really doesn't matter. Just don't get stuck on, I need to walk way back in there. Or maybe you're somebody who says, oh, I need to only walk 20 yards off the road. Well, either situation doesn't actually put you on a deer. That mentality is, and there's people that go both ways. There's guys that walk way, way back in there for some dumb reason. And then some people that sit really close to the road, and again, in my eyes, I'm like, okay, well, you're not necessarily hunting a terrain or something there. There's no reason for them to be there necessarily. So, that's the different spectrum, I guess. You got to just kind of make sure that you make that mile walk in for a reason,
Yep. And another little tip that definitely applies for out west, but apply here as well, is if there's any chances your boots are going to get wet, most likely no one else is going there.
Yeah, you put 2 inches of water or just a little bit of water in a place, and it keeps everybody out, and you're probably going to have it to yourself. So.
Yeah, because it's that way in Colorado. There's a spot where there's a road that kind of runs down the middle of the property, and everyone hunts the east side of that because 50 yards off the road on the west is a small creek that you got to cross, and no one wants to get their boots wet. You got that whole side to yourself because everyone's on the other side, and that applies for here too. So keep that in mind.
And that's not just public land either. I know my cousin owns a really good small property in the western part of the state, and it can be a raging river at times. And there's parts of that river that get 12 feet, so he had to kind of scout out where he could cross on that river given the water conditions and be able to cross. And then he doesn't own very much on the other side. He does own some woods over there. But he's killed like 160 class deer on that spot crossing that river. He's had to almost go up to his armpits in water to get over there. And it's made all the difference in the world for his hunting, so, even on private land, don't think, oh, I'm on private land. I don't have to cross anything, that's not necessarily the case. We have a huge swamp at home in Minnesota that, sometimes you got to hoof it in there, so.
Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah, this is a great episode. I'm glad you came on. It's very informative for even me. I'm definitely taking some notes and going to implement some of this stuff this year.
Awesome. Good to hear. I'm glad I could help.
So, no, you absolutely did. And I'm looking forward to seeing your success this year. Maybe if you get lucky, we'll have you come back on and we'll talk about it.
All right, Nathan. Well, hopefully the same for you. Any ducks too, let me know, and we can definitely talk some more. Not a problem at all. So.
All right, sir. I appreciate it.
All righty. Thank you, Nathan.
And I'd like to thank Brady for coming on and talking whitetails. So guys, if you ain't aware, we do have an Instagram page and we have a Facebook page. They're both called Hunt Fish Wisconsin. I'll put the links in the show notes. And if you'd like to reach us, you can do so at the email, which is backcountrywisconsin@gmail.com. Until next week,